Hello and welcome to another episode of the Your Way podcast. And I am absolutely delighted to welcome Teresa Shantz on this week. Although, as I've started, I'm like, am I saying your surname right? Can I just check in?
Shantz. So very
Shantz.
close with your accent is perfect.
I know it's just like, so in the UK, we have a divide, a north-south divide. We have the glass people and we have the glass people. And I am a glass person,
Gotcha.
which makes
Yeah.
me common for the UK, but that's okay. Anyway,
It's
so
perfect. It's perfect,
welcome,
Louise.
welcome, Teresa.
Thank you for having me, honey. I'm excited to be here.
It's an absolute delight and a pleasure to have you on. Um, would you like to just share a little bit about who you are and what you do so that people have got an idea before we dive in?
Absolutely. Well, so I live in America, obviously with my accent, in Winterset, Iowa, the home of where John Wayne was born. And if you've ever seen the Bridges of Madison County movie, that's an older movie, which is like a romance movie. It was filmed here. We have Bridges of Madison County in this county, so it's beautiful rolling hills. And so I am here with my soulmate Tom, and we have a business called TNT Spirit Works, where we support people in getting in tune with the unseen parts of who they are and understanding how to work with your energy, how to work with your guidance, how to work with your intuition, and being practical about it. So I'm not about woo woo, about weird stuff, whatever. I'm just like, hey, I'm here to live, I'm here to breathe, pay bills, and I need to be I'm just a normal person. I've had things in my life that have happened that I've gotten to the realization of, oh, that's why that happened with the unseen parts of me. So the enthusiasm that I have for helping people and really supporting people and understanding about that unseen parts of us is part of my podcast called Enthusiastically Spiritual, which if you see the video, you'll see I'm pointing to my enthusiastically spiritual sign on the wall. And that podcast has been running for 4 years now, and it's all about mind, body, spirit aspects around who we are in the spiritual being. So my husband Tom and I do the episodes now, which is a lot of fun. And so besides that, we do some online courses, we do events in the Midwest and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, that's a little about me. Oh yeah, I wrote a book last year too. The Soul Quake
You did, and
Survival
I want to
Guide.
talk about the book. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I wrote the book to share with people about, again, these weird things that happen to us. And like, you're not
Mm,
weird when it happens because it's happened to me and I put it in the book to share with you. So that's a
yeah.
little about me in a nutshell, Louise.
I love it. And I think it's so important that we normalize the stuff. So, I have a different approach to you, but I will share things about myself in an attempt to allow people to be like, oh, it's not just me. Because it's very, very easy to feel completely alone in the world, right? You can be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone. And so, first thing, as we dive in, I would love you to say a little bit more about what your version of helping people with their unseen parts looks like, because people might be used to me talking about parts work from like an internal family systems therapy perspective, but I think your take on this is different. So, can you say a bit more?
Sure, yeah. So I do what I call consultations or sessions, one-on-one
Mhm.
sessions. And so I've been trained through a place called the Way College out of Osceola, Iowa. And this place really is a school in regards to understanding how to work with your energy, your guides, your intuition. And so I do sessions where I'll, go one-on-one and just share with you. Again, the first one is called Gifts and Guidance.
Mhm.
And it's like how many we have 4 types of intuition, and I put them in a specific order, working with your guidance to my guidance. That's the only way I work is guidance to, and just getting insights as to, how do you communicate through those 4 gifts? How many guides did you bring in this lifetime with you? And where's your
Yeah.
energy at right now? So we do offer, and I say we, Tom and I both, these sessions. And so that's one thing that we do offer. And then there'll be some other things that'll be coming to down the road, like some master classes and things
Yeah.
to do more experiential, because I really enjoy that, is really helping people feel what we're talking about. Because
Mm.
again, Louise, we can talk about all this stuff randomly and whatever, but unless people feel it, like feel it from their gut or feel it from their, like their knowings, or see it in the third eye, you just don't get it. You really have to experience it. And so that's a lot of what Tom and I do is that experiential part of having people really feel what they're going through and with that unseen part of them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And just to clarify, so for you, the unseen parts would be what I might call more like the spiritual side of ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So sometimes I call them like your psychic perceptions, your
Yeah.
sensitivity. It depends, Louise, on who I'm speaking to,
Hmm.
right? Your
Yeah.
third eye, your ESP. I mean, like who am I speaking to? And then I just use the language that I'm speaking,
Yeah.
through me so people understand what I'm talking about. Absolutely.
Yeah. Sure. And so, and again, I'm going to give my perspective of this. Now, people who have listened to this for a while are going to know. So I'm kind of on my spiritual journey, but like early on in like more of a spiritually curious, like I like to dabble and sort of tap into things and look around stuff. Um, and it's all very interesting to me, but not to this place where I'm like, I wouldn't consider myself to be like deeply embodied. But what I think is super interesting is the gifts that we all have. And the more of this work that we do, the more I'm going to sound like a complete conspiracy theorist now, and I don't give a shit. It's my podcast. It's
Go
called Your
girl.
Way, right?
Yes.
Is that as and I'm going to say particularly as women. Now there will be men listening to this, and I do work with men, but this tends to come up for me more as women. I think as women, we are considerably more powerful than we give ourselves the credit for, okay? In a way that society has pushed down and hidden for a very long time because powerful women are quite intimidating. And again, I'm not big on like, let's like blast the patriarchy, but also as a society, women have been kind of suppressed, oppressed, pushed down. And I think it's really interesting when you start doing your personal development work, you start to get this felt sense of there's an internal power in me. Like there's something in here. You start, like you said, like, and we'll talk about intuition in a minute, but you start to get this feeling of like, there's something else. I'm not sure what the something else is, but like, and it can feel terrifying, right? Because it's like you get this sense of your power and you're like, fuck.
Yes. Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up that thing about being suppressed, or because the true reason, in my understanding of why this is not talked about more, like we'll come in and go, hey, you've all got a spiritual side. We always talk about the mind, body, and spirit, but it's more as a concept versus an embodiment. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
My belief, and it's funny because Tom and I were just talking about this the other day, is that it's because if you understand this part of you and that we have these instincts, every single soul on the planet has them. There's no one that does not have them because we're all energy, right? So in understanding this, that, you have the power to make your own decisions, you have the power to, to get insights, to get impressions, to get hunches, it gives you freedom.
Mm.
And there's some people and some places that don't want people to have freedom, right? I want you to be a victim. I want you to be fearful. I want you to be scared. I want you to, to just go, don't go there, because it gives people freedom. I got chills on that. Ah.
I know because the worst thing we could possibly do is think for ourselves and then look at some of the societal stuff that's going on and the conditioning and the stuff that's been programmed into us. It's very, very little, you know, go and work hard and then get this good job and stay and work for the corporates and give yourself to the corporates. All the hours, do all of these different pieces. And then it's like people wake up and it's really uncomfortable when you wake up. Clients
Yeah.
are like, I've got clients at the moment who are like, but I can't go in and enjoy my job anymore. I'm like, what's the point? Like, yeah.
When you change, right? When you do that shift, you're like, oh shit,
Mhm.
nothing's the same anymore. Like,
Yeah.
and you can't go back. I think that's one thing too, why a lot of people don't go there, Louise, because
Yeah.
once you go there, you can't go back. Once you know what you know,
Mm.
you can't unknow it. It's
Yeah.
like as if the day that, we all can see, UFOs, or what do they call them? AP, there's no name for them now, but we'll call them UFOs.
Yeah.
The day we can all see them, well, we're not going to be able to unsee them, right? But
Mm.
now we get these, oh yeah, that person's seen it, or maybe someone has, whatever, but maybe we haven't. But
Mm.
once you see something, you're like, oh damn, I can never unsee that. Just
Yeah.
like our intuition, I can never take it back, that I had a feeling, and on that day of that feeling, that happened, and I knew that was going to happen. Or I had a dream that came true, or I
Yeah.
was thinking about this person and they called me, and oh my gosh, like all these synchronicities. And a
Yeah.
lot of my found don't have to be like, the most traumatic thing, or it doesn't. They're subtle. And I think that's the thing for myself over the years that I've recognized, oh my God, like all these breadcrumbs, and they're little ones, right? All along the path that make up to this one event that happened or something that occurred. And I'm like, wow, the subtleties of our intuition is really
Mm.
profound.
Yeah, yeah. And when we start to listen and get that sense, so the way, my access for this is through the trauma healing, because when we have trauma and we experience things that are too much for us, we disconnect from our bodies. So we're not able to access that intuition. We're basically just like a floating head and neck. And then once we start to connect back in and we can start to feel it and start to sense it, then you actually have to build, you actually then have to rebuild that muscle of self-trust. Like, oh, I do know and I can decide and I am in charge and I have got all of these choices and this is what I can do. So I would love to read it because I know a little bit about the fact that you weren't like a 3-year-old doing this work, right? This is like something that's evolved for you.
Yes,
So
yes.
can you share a little bit about how did this happen for you? What did your awakening look like?
Well, I'll say it started when I was 38 and I went to massage therapy school. And from that moment, things opened. But before that, I've always been very sensitive, but I didn't know how sensitive I was.
Mm,
And throughout my life, I had skin disorders. I had hives real bad. I had
mm,
psoriasis all over my hands, and I had autoimmune disease. So there were all these signs where for me, that was my sensitivity. My understanding is my sensitivity to the environment, to
mm,
people that I was around, to like you're talking
yeah.
about inward stuff that was stirring. Like I went into the military at 17 and went back to Germany, where I say back to because that was my previous incarnation. My last
Mm,
lifetime was in Germany. When I was over there for almost 3 years, a couple times almost died. I went through all kinds of stuff that was coming up through my skin. So
mm,
these sensitivities, I had no idea till really 38. And then when massage therapy school, like I said, everything just opened up well, sometimes it was like big things, right? Like, oh my gosh, what's that? And then sometimes it was like, oh, that it was a knowing and understanding throughout the years, really. And then 49 is when I got the divorce. And that's when everything was like, it was like full on. I get what's going on here now. Totally.
mm. Yeah. So, for the benefit of the listeners who might be like, no one's come on this podcast and talked about past lives before.
Then
And I
there's
appreciate
Teresa.
and I appreciate this is like a massive rabbit hole that we could go down and spend a long time on. But do you like whatever feels good for you to just say a little bit more about that and your approach and how you got to that place of like, I've had a past life where I was in Germany.
Yeah, so you're right. This could be a whole other podcast for sure. Let's see, number two. No, for myself, and I
Before you
often wondered
go,
about this because a lot of
I
people know
so hope
nothing about
that
their past
you
life, and I wasn't
enjoyed
going. I want my
today's
past lives to
episode.
come up. I,
And
I
if you
really never
did,
even
I'd
thought
like to
about past
ask
lives,
you a
honestly.
favor,
I know the
please,
Shirley MacLaine
because
things
the
back in the
way that
'80s.
this
She was all big
podcast
about it, and
grows
I
and
wasn't
the
even
way
aware
that
of
more
that at
people
that
get to
moment.
benefit from these
But
materials
I started doing
is that
craniosacral
more people
work.
find it.
And
And
so
that
on the
means
table,
that
the very first time I
subscribes
had this, it
and
was a
likes
while
and
into it. Not, I
shares
was
are
really
so, so
obviously
important
embracing the
to
craniosacral. I took the
this
training and
space.
also had a group that I
So,
worked with all the
my
time.
ask of
So there's
you,
one
if you have
gentleman I
got
was really
value from the
comfortable with.
podcast
And
today,
for some
is
reason, all
give
of a
it a
sudden I'm on the
review,
table, and
give
next
it
thing you
a
know,
like,
I'm in a box.
share it with a
And
friend,
I
and make
realize
sure that you are
I'm buried
subscribed.
alive in a
I
box.
really
And I
appreciate it.
wasn't
I
freaking or
really
anything. And
appreciate you
I
being
get off the
here,
table, and you're
and I
always
look
like, so
forward
how
to
was the session
continuing
or
to
anything you want to
support
share? And I'm
you
like,
to do
yeah, I
life,
was dead in the
business,
box.
relationships,
And he's
and
Mm,
like,
all of it
okay.
your
And we
way.
went on. And so things
mm,
started surfacing really through that therapy, Louise,
yeah.
because I was at a place where I was ready, I guess, to open up, as well as the
Mm,
people I was having the therapy by, I was real comfortable with. Now, that was the very first thing. And then I started putting together all kinds of other lives that started coming up. And why for myself is because this journey, I needed to heal some aspects of those lifetimes and forgive.
mm,
Now,
mm,
why does not everyone do this? Because it's everyone's journey is different. And
mm,
so, the fact that I freely share that, I've been this and that in past lives, but I'm in this life, right? So this
mm,
is what matters. I mean, those things surface
yeah.
because I needed to heal different
Mm,
aspects of them, but I'm here now in this life as Teresa Shantz in a female body in, the middle of the Midwest. So this is what this is what matters the most now. But for some reason, those really came up for years, in different
Yeah.
time frames.
Yeah. And there's a way to move through and heal through. And I'll just be really honest about this. I'm leaning more towards, right? But I'm not, I don't know, we ever know, no. You might know. Like I had a coach once who was like, no, I know. I'm leaning more towards, okay, we're here as a soul to elevate our consciousness and work through various bits. And maybe we've had past lives, and maybe others have had lots of past lives. And I like to think I'm a really evolved human, which means I've had lots of past lives.
A million.
But
Right.
but 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 I have had some experiences. So I had a Reiki session. First of all, when you were talking about your cranial sacral, I thought you meant you were doing it to the client and then you had that experience. I was like, that's weird when you're the practitioner, but then I realized you were the one lying on the
Right.
um but I had this experience where I had Reiki, and actually the Reiki practitioner afterwards, and she was really upset about it. She was like, I've got a message that I need to give you. And she went through and she'd had this whole experience of experiencing one of my past lives through this Reiki session. And I cannot tell you how profound what it was that she shared in terms of the relevancy of what I'm working through here now. And
Beautiful.
the long and short of it was I ended up sacrificing myself to try and save one of my sisters. And even when I did that, it still wasn't good enough.
Mhm.
And then ultimately I killed myself in
Mhm.
the past life thing. So it was really like it was really intense for her to share with me.
Mhm.
Actually, it really allowed me to move through more of my rescuing patterns. The whole thing of like, I'm here to rescue everybody else. I need to save everyone. I have a whole story about like, if I don't rescue, particularly my immediate family members,
Mhm.
they're going to die and it's going to be my fault.
Mhm.
And this is what had happened in this thing. Because when I found my sister, she'd already passed in
Mm.
that experience. So it's just very, very interesting. You could take a really skeptical view of it. You could take a really intense view of it, and then you can also take where I sort of sit, which is like, okay, well, what is this trying to teach me or show me now? And how do I move through this and work through this?
Right. Yeah, like
Because
for
I
myself,
can
yeah.
go
I'm
on.
sorry, go ahead,
No, go on.
Louise. Well, for myself, like I haven't like thought about these so much, right? Like they've come
Mm,
up, I've worked with it, and then I've moved on. Like I haven't gone day
yeah.
and night, like, oh, what, and like going over and over in my mind. No, I'm like, okay, that was that time that, the thing in the box, I got that. Okay, next. I mean, like, so I get what you're saying. And some people might like dwell. That's what I was coming for, dwell
Mm,
on it. And it's
mm,
like, no, it's like, okay, for some reason that surfaced, I got the message and know what I need to do for myself healing or healing with relationships, like you're saying,
yeah.
and move on. So,
Yeah, which for me feels like a healthy way of doing it. It's like I'm going to learn from this, I'm going to move on rather than I'm going to drown in this because you could drown in it.
oh, hells yeah. Like the stuff that I experienced as a Nazi soldier in Germany. Are you kidding me?
Mm,
Hells
mm,
yeah. And then I
mm,
had family members come in this lifetime who were at that camp with me. So in some of the lives, I saw them as what they were in the previous and horrific. Like I got chills. I'm saying it. So yeah, forgiveness and my thing, like you're talking about, some of the patterns that have shown up this life might have been about I have no control, so I'm trying to control everything. Because in that existence, as a soldier, we were made to go in. There was no ifs,
mm,
ands, or buts, and I had no control in what I saw there and what people the people at the camp were experiencing. I had no control. Like, I mean, you just have to suck it up and go, and it's horrific, right?
mm,
So there's no reason for me to go down that pathway and into the bottom pit, which some could, but I'm like, no,
mm,
I got what I needed out of that. And, and again, it makes me realize too that we can come in as saints, we can come in as sinners, we can come in as killers, we can come in as you can be all kinds of things because we are experiencing different lifetimes through that
mm,
spiritual part of who we are and the experiences we have. So there's no judging. I hate,
mm,
it's even weird looking at the world now and all the people out there doing really horrific things, and we may have done those in the past too because we're moving through.
yeah,
My thing is just not getting caught up in the areas. I don't need to be over there right now doing that,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So,
yeah,
and again,
yeah.
that's, yeah.
And word of warning for people on your healing journeys, when you do a certain amount of your own current healing and you think, oh, I'm quite healed now, that's the time when the body's like, all right. Okay, but you've got some other stuff to deal with. So we'll bring that in now. Now you're ready. It's like this never ends.
Exactly. It like the onion, the layer comes off and then here's the next layer, right?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So you talked about this all kind of came about age 38 and you had your divorce. I'd love to talk about this a little bit because and I talked about this with you on your podcast recently, but one of the things that I have personally experienced is this fear. The more that I go through and evolve and change and look at stuff and do different bits, the more it's going to negatively impact my relationships, right? Now, ultimately, I pretty much lost my relationship with my parents from doing this work, and I can even feel the emotion of saying that now, and that we're nearly 4 years in, of that deep pain of, well, this is who I am, but this version of who I am doesn't match the version who I needed to be to fit within that family model, right? And that is deeply painful.
Mm-hmm.
And so from that place of, oh, now I'm really alone, although my therapist would argue I was always alone and now I'm just seeing it, but like that's again another
There's another
podcast for
deep
another
level.
day. Yeah. I can't, we can't do anything surface here.
No.
But then there is this fear every time I change and evolve. Because, like, if Nat listened to this conversation, he'd be like, she's lost her mind. I knew she was a little bit mental, but now listening to talk about this stuff, like, she's completely lost, right? About me, not about you. Well, probably about us both. Let's be
There's
realistic.
you too. Yeah.
But so there's all of these iterations, and even some of the stuff like where I'm less willing to people please or less willing to rescue. I repeated all those family patterns in my marriage, and then all of a sudden I was the person that's like, yeah, sorry, I'm not going to do that anymore. And so there's this fear of the more me I become, the more susceptible I become to losing my marriage. And I want to talk about this because this is also one of the biggest fears of my clients. And I think one of the biggest fears that stops people actually individuating, self-actualizing, becoming their true selves because they're like, it's going to cost me my relationships. So you were married?
Yes.
Discuss.
Yes, I was married for 29 years.
Mhm.
I had 2 daughters, and so they were both in their early 20s. One was 21 and 23 when I asked for the divorce and went through
Yeah.
the divorce. And so I know what you're talking about, Louise, because for years as I was doing my spiritual work, so I divorced at 49 and I started, so about 11 years, right? I was really immersed in all this stuff and exploring and my family didn't understand it. They, looked at me like deer in headlights. We went therapy with my husband, ex-husband, and said, look, this is going down. I'm going down this path. You're going down that path. And, which way are we going, right? Together. So it was a fear of mine too. And I was trying my hardest to save them and to help them come into my realm, but it just didn't happen. And it was really for myself, a blessing in disguise because to do the work I need to do, I needed to move out and to, find obviously Tom and move on, but not for everyone. I mean, it's individual, but I get why it's such a scary thing because I gave up everything. I mean, like even my daughters, it's been 7 years and they still don't, one has not talked to me in 7 years and one hasn't talked to me about 4.5 years. So I lost the kids, but they're with dad. So, I look at it like the bigger spiritual picture is they now need to work with his energy because he was an attorney and I was a full-time homemaker. I call it domestic engineer to make it sound nice.
Nice. I like
And
it.
and I was there 24/7 and he was working all the time. So I did my part. And so there's still challenges obviously with that in the sense of like their birthdays and stuff. I get a little sad,
Yeah, of course.
but yes, so I've had many people come up to me and say after the fact of, moving out of the situation I was in is, boy, Teresa, I've thought of that before, but could never do that. And I've also seen people in spiritual circles who've moved out of going further down their road because they knew what was coming, that their partner was not going to be on board. So,
Yeah.
you know, It's individual, Louise. I guess for what I've come to do, I'm a very strong intuitive. So I'm like,
Mhm.
this is one of our four gifts. It's the gift of I'm clairaudient. So in the stuff that Tom and I work on, that's one of them. So the attributes of being a intuitive is I'm a born leader. I'm very frank, honest, and direct. I just need the facts. So I'm very much like that. I'm pithy, I'm like, I don't need to go drawing out for a long time. So with what I'm saying, but so yeah, so with that being who I am, I'm like, I'm out of here. And I told Tom, I said, because he was still in Australia and I was in Florida when we met up in Iowa. I said, dude, if you didn't leave Australia and your ex-wife, because he was also married 29 years,
Yeah.
I was gone. Like it was my cut. It was my time. I was free, like it was ready to move on to whatever was coming next. So does that answer your question, Louise? I know it's kind of
It does, but there's follow-up
okay.
questions, so
Okay,
don't
go
you
for it.
worry. Don't you worry.
Okay, good, good,
Okay,
good.
so had you met Tom when you decided when you asked for the divorce?
Tom is who I was looking for. And when I met Tom, okay, so I was doing all kinds of, I was doing evolutionary astrology, and I was going to different places like
Yeah,
Hawaii, Scotland, and then in Iowa. And little did I know I was looking for Tom.
yeah.
So I found him in Iowa. We were in doing some spiritual techniques, and we had this like the veil dropped, and I'm like, oh my God, I know you. We were doing a technique, and we were across from each other. And then I went outside and I said, well, it's nice to meet up again this lifetime. He goes, you got that too. And then it was game
Mm,
on. Louise, I can't even tell you all the things that happened, like a past life where we were in Civil War together and he left and never came back.
mm,
So all these things, and we just kept having these, and I just knew he's who I need to be with. So on the way home, I left, we hugged a little, I left, and on the way home on the plane, I'm like, Spirit, what the heck? I don't even know this guy. And all I got
mm,
was, don't worry, it's going to be okay. It's all going to be okay. And then I called him. I
mm,
said, I don't know what's going on. Anyway, long story, short, but 4 days later, when I got home, I was like, oh God, I don't want to be here, right, with my ex. And 4 days in, he knew something was wrong. He's like, what's going on? I said, let's go talk. And I sat down. I said, I want a divorce. He goes, what? I'm like, duh. So yeah. So it was when I met Tom,
mm.
that's when the energy was
It's when you
primed and
knew.
ready to go. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. Because I think it's just interesting for people to hear because I think sometimes we do need that nudge in order to like to bring up that thing of like, no, this is really wrong because otherwise it's like, well, maybe this is as good as it's going to get, and I've done all this work so far, and like, how many men really are out there who have done this level of work that I want to do, and all the rest of it. But then you get that message, and it's like, no, I've got to listen to this. I've got to pay attention.
Yeah, and I've always been like
Yeah.
this, Louise. Like my whole life, like when I went into the U.S. Air Force at what I
Mm,
signed at 17, went in 2 weeks before I turned 18. I just knew that's where I needed to go,
mm,
because then from there I went to Germany and did healing work,
mm,
and then from there it was I met my ex in Germany. So it's like all these things, but I've always been someone like I'm just hell yes doing that. Now
mm.
I do check, but I'm a real good easy hell yes on the dime.
And do you think that's because you've always been quite in touch with your intuition?
No,
That's quite a leading question, actually. Why do you
no.
think you're helpless? Yeah, okay.
It's in my being, Louise.
Mm,
Like it's
mm,
just I'm like I think I was 4 when I packed my bag. I had a little grocery bag and I put my Casper the Ghost game in. I had my little
mm,
pink slippers on. I grabbed my brother and I said, "We're out of here." And we left the house and started walking down the street because I was ready to go. So at a young age, I was ready to go, but I
yes.
obviously had to go through the process of, and healing and working with other people. But I've just always had this knack of this is what I'm doing. And this is,
Mm,
and this is this, I'm done with this and on with this.
yeah. I forgot that we had that in common. Do you remember I did the post last year when I talked about moving out at 4 and packing my little suitcase? And you were like, me
Yes.
too.
See, you had it too,
Sometimes we
girl.
know. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So you followed the nudges and you knew. And again, just for people listening, because I think there's a fear of like, well, what happens if I like 29 years marriage? It is a long time.
Yes.
And not to do down any of your past experiences, right? But what did stepping really, really bravely and courageously into it's game on, as you said, what has that opened up for you that not doing that? wouldn't have?
For myself, I recognize in looking back at that 29-year marriage, and it was, I was married to a wonderful man. I was never beaten. He was not alcoholic. It was really like, if you looked at it, you'd be like, damn. I mean, like, I traveled freely. We had money because he was an attorney. So it was nothing except for the fact that inside, for at least, I want to say 15 years of it, I was unhappy.
Mm.
Very, very unhappy. And so leaving that situation and moving out and moving on, my happiness returned. And not just because of Tom, really it's because I recognized, who I am, and that, the next steps I need to go down the road, and just being out of the situation where I was so unhappy. So that would be the key thing. And then, of course, stepping into step by step of what I'm here to do, with working with the spiritual part of my journey and other people supporting that. And again, that just that opened up freely too, as I went forward, recognizing that this is part of me. This is part of all of us. And people just don't get it. They don't talk about it. They think it's weird. They're afraid of it, scared. No, it's like, this is just part of us. And so that's been, obviously it's a passion of mine, but it only really came up the last few years because I've really recognized how important it is for me to understand that part, because it's been there from the day one. I
Yeah.
came in sensitive. I came into a mom who's sensitive, came into the situation that was sensitive. And, we had, ghosts when I was a little kid, and my mom's always talked about things like that, of the, other natural or otherworldly, but she's been scared about it and fearful. And
Yeah.
there's no reason to be, if you can understand this is just part of our existence and how to work with these energies and things. So
Yeah. 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 Which again is a really brave thing to do, because it goes against the norm.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just a brave person.
You
I
are
see
a
myself with a
brave.
shield. I got a brave shield on.
And so I had, so my parents' family are decidedly cut off from anything spiritual. I was raised Catholic. My mum was Catholic. My dad is Church of England. Um, but one thing I heard an awful lot growing up is, you're so sensitive. You're so sensitive. You're too sensitive. Oh, you're so sensitive. Why are you upset? Oh, you're so sensitive. And it's interesting, because the more in touch that I become with myself, I am noise sensitive. I am energy sensitive. I can go into a cafe, and if the energy is wrong, or like, you can tell, like, I'll know people in there are like pissed off or they're angry and stuff, and I can't stay in there. And
Yeah.
even like, there's an event coming up in the village this weekend. There'll be lots of visitors, and people keep asking me to volunteer for stuff, and it's just a real clear no for me. I'm like, no,
Mm-hmm.
no.
Right.
But
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of people, I think, maybe see themselves as sensitive, and they see it as a negative, or they don't quite
Mm-hmm.
understand it, or like it's a bad thing. And what advice would you give people to take care of themselves?
Mm-hmm.
So, not to make themselves wrong for that aspect of their personalities, but to take care of themselves and those aspects of their personalities.
Well, it's really individual to the person, and like you said, where you're at, because some people are more on the religious side, and that's okay, because that you're at a place where that's what you come in to work with. Because for myself, I didn't come in to work with religion, but I've experienced it. And there's even parts, it's funny because Tom came in Catholic. And so when we go to mass, when we're up in Minnesota, I just love it, because I resonate with it, because I have been Catholic so many lifetimes, Louise. So it's like part of me, but really just, and also finding the pathway of who resonates for you. Just like, you're doing this wonderful work of, helping people go in and, and do that deep, excavation and release things. Finding the person that you trust, find the person that you resonate with energetically, and then seeing what they offer, because there's so many amazing practitioners on the planet right now. Spiritual, NLP, breath work, body work, whatever it is. Because for myself, I actually had to go down the road of massage therapy, because working with the tissues of my body is what helped open up things.
Yes.
So it depends on the person. So that's what I would say. It's really up to individual, what your journey, what you're ready to go into next. And if you're not, it's okay. That's the thing too. It's like, this isn't for everybody, but it's in everybody.
Mm. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And we always get to choose, I think, where we press pause. So
Absolutely.
when I look back now at my 2018 burnout, and it was burnout, and I'm not here to sort of deny the fact, but I also see it as the start of a great awakening. Whether that like a spiritual awakening, another awakening, but just essentially a really strong message of like, love, what the fuck are you doing with your life? Like it's
Yes.
time to pay attention, right? Lots of symptoms, lots of things going on. And I think, and it can be really, really challenging when you actually look and see this is not just one thing. It's not just one thing that needs to get burnt down here. So for me, it was like tricky family relationship, work was a mess, terrible relationship with my body, terrible relationship with myself. I was like the most controlling person I think anyone could ever hope to meet. Like there was just so much stuff to go at from a place of I would have been completely in denial about all of it. And it was super, super challenging. Now I think if you and then later the more spiritual stuff came in because I'm not sure I could have dealt with that as well at the same time. But I know that a lot of people go through what you call like a soul quake, the stuff that kind of shakes us and wakes us up. And you wrote a book about this last year, which I haven't got the hard copy, but I've listened to it on audio, on Audible, and it's really, really great. So for the people who are in that space of like there's so much going on, it's draining, there's so much going on. What are the things that people can support themselves with? And I know again, like you just said, there's so many different options, but how can people start to support themselves with just curiously tapping into some of this stuff. And do you want to say a little bit about your book and how it can help people? Because I think it's a really great way in.
Mhm. Yes, thank you so much, Louise, for asking that and the segue in because this book is not, I mean, I call it a spiritual book, I guess. It's really a self-help book.
Yeah.
So in it, there are some very easy cleansing techniques that you can work with your aura and cleansing your aura. There are 12 spiritual awarenesses, everything from like, just stepping back and getting a bigger picture of what's the situation, of maybe, perhaps working with your guides, your angels. And they're really met with stories that I share throughout my life way before I was spiritual. So they're just really regular stories about things I've experienced that might make someone go, "Oh my gosh, I've had a similar experience and I'm not crazy." And so the book
Yeah.
really to me is that's the gift is really to help people just resonate with the circumstances, the obstacles, the challenges, and then even not the challenges, like just understanding those pieces of us before something happened or before you have a major soul quake. And I do start the book by saying I grew up in California where, the earth shook. And so,
Mm,
and I have the first part of it saying that my mom would say, listen, there's no birds, there's no birds. The dogs aren't, going crazy because they normally do in California.
mm,
And then we would have an earthquake. So being so in tune with yourself, but it is step
mm.
by step. So the book really
Yeah.
is a great beginning step. And that's why I also made it it's a simple read. It's not
Mm,
like what's all these weird, words or and things to understand. No, it's a very easy book to understand for anyone. And that's
yeah.
why I did it that way too, just to make it a great place to start to, to revive that connection to spirit in what I
Yeah.
call earth-shaking times.
Yeah. And I love that. And I think people are a bit more aware of it. So one of the things that I've been looking more into is like Jungian
Mhm.
psychotherapy, Jungian things. And
Mhm.
because
Yep.
my therapist is really into the dream.
Mhm.
And previous coaches that I've worked with are really like the dream being the way that we get our guidance and the way we're communicating with. So I'm now super curious about my dreams because I have always been a really, really, really intense dreamer.
Mhm.
Like some nights I wake up in the morning and I'm like, I've been tortured the whole night. Can I just have a break, please? Have a break, please.
Yes.
But I think it, but I think it, but it but just in the way that people might go and spend some time on YouTube looking at that and like the unconscious and how that communicates with us, I think your book is accessible in a similar way of like, well, actually, where do I notice I'm most in touch with my intuition and the messages that come in, however individual people might see that.
Yeah,
Um,
go ahead.
no, go on.
Well, yeah, so I hear what you're saying because I have met many people who've said, "Oh, I'm not psychic," or "I'm not," and then they'll share that, "Well, yeah, I've saw when Aunt Betty died, I saw her in the corner," or
Mm,
everyone has these stories, but it's and not everyone has come out and share about all the things that in that realm that we experience or see or hear or feel. But it's there and everyone has these experiences. So the book does, again, I share a lot of stories in there and real,
mm,
compact units of things I've experienced, and then some I didn't. Like I can recall when one time I walked into a garden place and all of a sudden I smelled fried chicken. I'm like, fried chicken. It really, stimulated me. And I
mm,
was looking around, there was no one there. There was nothing. Then all of a sudden I knew it was my grandfather because we always bought
mm,
him a bucket of KFC to own when, when we went and saw him. So, it's those kind of things
mm.
and many other things that have realm that can be supportive, especially, and understanding that it's not anything to fear, it's not anything to be scared of. And that's why the book is a real good ally for a
Yeah.
beginning place, as well as those that like, yourself that have more knowledge.
Mm,
It just gives you a different perspective. And I think that's what I was talking about earlier with all the body workers and people out in the world right now supporting and healing and doing the work
yeah.
for and backing others is because there's so many different layers and just and accessing it and however it shows up. And so that's how it showed up through spirit in this book. And I wrote it during COVID, so I was going through an inner soul quake. My
Mm,
editor was going through a soul quake, so it was quite the interesting moment for sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. And I think it's my biggest thing that I would say has happened for me in the last 6 years is my ability to be more curious.
Mm.
So rather than like immediately shut stuff down or immediately dismiss stuff, it's just to be curious. It's just to be curious. It's to be open. It's to be sometimes skeptical, but usually not. But like because I think my husband gets so worried. But I'm like, I feel like I've got a sense because he's like, people are going to take advantage of you because it's stuff, there's nothing that you can prove or whatever. But it's like just having this sense of what feels good. And I think that has happened the more that I'm in touch with my intuition. And you can't see, I grab my stomach as I say that.
Mhm.
So as we kind of come to the end, I would love for you to say a little bit about like what does intuition mean to you? And it's questions that I've had from clients a lot of like, I don't think I can access my intuition. Like, where would I start?
Mhm.
So I know that's two questions, but like, what does intuition mean to you? Where could people start?
Well, intuition, what it means to me is it is part of me. So
Mm,
again, back to that mind, body, spirit. I like to say spirit, body, mind, because the
mm,
spirit is what comes in first, and then we come into a body, and then we develop the mind. So spirit,
mm,
body, mind. And so to me, it is really an asset that I can access anytime. I'm never alone. I can always work with my spiritual helpers, angels, guides, whatever you want to call them, to support me on what I choose to do. Because again, it's a choice. And again, like your beautiful podcast, we can do it our way, your way,
mhm, mhm.
but really knowing for myself that that is a part of who I am. So that is what intuition means to me. And what's the other part? What was the other question, Louise?
How do people start to access it? When people are like, I don't know how to access this.
Yeah. Yeah. So the first word that comes to me is trust,
Mm,
just trusting what you're picking up on, whether it be you hear something, whether it be you see something, whether it be you feel something, or you just know, because those are
mm,
the four ways that the how I work with them, it comes in. Because other people
yeah.
can say there's this one and that one too, but I keep
Mm,
it simple. There's four ways.
yeah.
But trust, just trust what you're picking up on and and then reach out, like I said, to people or, get,
Yeah.
references in books or whatever that can support you in trusting what you're picking up on because we all have the ability.
Yeah. So hear, see, feel, or know.
Absolutely. Yes. Those are the
Yeah. And
four.
then that's quite accessible, isn't it? To start
Mhm.
sensing into, and it might just be one of the four that's stronger for a particular person.
Yeah, absolutely. We have them
Yeah.
come in a certain way. And so, yeah, and they come in quickly, but it really depends. Yeah, some people may have more like you were mentioning too, going into stores. Like when I go in, I can even smell like way far away. I can smell things like, and
Mm,
that's a sense, right? It's one of our
mm.
senses.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and why am I picking up on that smell? Or is this something like with the chicken?
Mm.
The darn chicken. But anyway, so yeah, it's just really those 4 ways and just trusting in it.
Yeah. And I think you've got, which may or may not have already happened, but people might be able to go and find a replay. You've got a
Yes.
class coming up that's going to touch upon intuition. Do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's actually this coming weekend. It's called Get in Sync. Fire up all cylinders of your intuition. So my husband Tom and I with TNT Spirit Works is our business are going to be offering a free 60-minute session about the 4 gifts. So we're going to go into each one, probably have some techniques to help you maybe start feeling or tuning into them, and then giving you an overview of who you are as a soul and why to use these gifts and what's the benefit of it. So it's going to be a really fun hour.
Amazing. So people who are listening to this live or relatively live, head to the show notes. There is a link in there that's got all of Teresa's links in. I would recommend going and getting the book. Also, sign up to this free masterclass because what have you got to lose? It's an hour of your time, and you can just notice what's calling you, what's feeling interesting. I listened to a podcast the other day, and the woman talked about lots of different things you can tap into, and she was like, just notice the things that make you feel like a bit sparkly.
Like that.
And she talked about lots of different things, and it was interesting because she talked about, and as soon as she said herbalism, my body was like, oh, I'm interested. Like,
Mhm.
that's something because I like to play around with it, but it's like, oh, it's something I want to know more about. So just go and sign up, go to the show note, share with friends, and amazing. So thank you so much for coming on today.
It has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And I am just honored to be here. Thank you, Louise. You're wonderful.
Thank you so much. Is there anything that you would like to share with listeners by way of like, I don't know, motivational advice or anything that you wanted to say that you haven't said yet as we finish off?
I would like to say that honoring your unique journey and
Mm.
not comparing yourself to anyone else or what anyone else is going through or experiencing because you've come in to do things your way. Ah, that's what I want to say. No,
Perfect.
yes.
Very on brand. Thank you, Teresa. Right. Thank you so much, everybody. Um, come and let us know what you made of this episode because it's a little bit different to usual ones. Um, I'm really interested. Go and find Teresa. I'm sure there's a link in the show notes that will help you go and find Teresa on Facebook, where she's very active, always doing wonderful things. Check out her podcast, do all the things, and just allow yourself to be curious and lean into this because there is a world of goodness when we access what I'm going to call our innate gifts and the power that sometimes is hidden underneath when we spend too much time in our heads. All right, I'll see you next time. Thanks, Teresa.
Thanks, Louise.
Before you go, I so hope that you enjoyed today's episode. And if you did, I'd like to ask you a favor, please, because the way that this podcast grows and the way that more people get to benefit from these materials is that more people find it. And that means that subscribes and likes and shares are so, so important to this space. So, my ask of you, if you got value from the podcast today, is give it a review, give it a like, share it with a friend, and make sure that you are subscribed. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you being here. And I look forward to continuing to support you to do life, business, relationships, and all of it your way.